class. Let me report. There we go. And today is a special day. It's Rosh Chodesh. It's the first of Adar. So literally minutes ago was the first time the moon would be appearing. Actually, in the Holy Land of Israel, in Jerusalem, the moon has just appeared, and that's where it's appearing around the world. We just gave a blessing for the new month on Shabbat, and we announced that the moon will appear today, Rosh Chodesh, the first of Adar. So we are ready to begin. It's a month of joy. It's actually a leap year, so it's a double month. We have two Adars, so it's definitely a special time. And it's appropriate to have today's class on Rosh Chodesh because it's going to talk about the souls of the Jewish people, what happens to us on Rosh Chodesh. So just to summarize, in the previous section, we're just to bring everyone up to speed, we're on chapter 39. I'll be sharing my screen in a moment. If you're looking inside, it'll be on page 455 in the practical Tanya, but no need to have the book in front of you because we're going to pull it up on the screen. But what we spoke about is the differences between the souls of the righteous, in Hebrew tzaddikim, and those and the angels. So the angels are referred to as animals, as they're the faces of the holy throne. In Ezekiel's vision was the vision of the face of a lion, the face of an eagle, the face of an ox. It's referring to angels, but they are on a lower world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, where they don't have the free choice like animals, and they are able to do one thing at a time, the way God instructs them. Whereas tzaddikim rise to a level of intelligence, which is in the world of Bria, world of creation, and they have a higher level. But now what we're going to say is that's the souls of tzaddikim. What about me and you? So in the next section, it's going to say that on Shabbat and on Rosh Chodesh, which is today, our souls are elevated like those of the tzaddikim. So it's a special time. By the way, you should just know, especially for the ladies on the call, in the class, that on Rosh Chodesh, which is today and yesterday, women actually, they have a special connection to Rosh Chodesh, and therefore they actually don't do certain work or chores. Let's say laundry. I was actually doing laundry. I actually enjoy doing laundry, so I do it often. But like it's my job in the house. But there's a lot of laundry this week because we had a bat mitzvah. We actually hosted a lot of people from our family for Shabbat. So there's a lot of tablecloths and linen. So it's a nonstop laundry exercise. But the Dina's like, it's Rosh Chodesh. I can't do any of it. So women actually traditionally don't do laundry on Rosh Chodesh. But there's something special that happens to our neshama, to our soul, on Shabbat and on Rosh Chodesh, as we're going to see now on page 455 if you're looking inside. And I am about to share the screen to follow along. All right, I hope you all can see the screen. Actually, I'm going to turn the page and then we'll be set. Okay, section 2 is your soul on the Shabbat. We have learned that ordinary souls cannot enter the world of Bria. The Tanya now notes an exception to this rule. And the exception is as follows. Ordinary souls can't enter the world of Bria except for on the Shabbat, which is every week, and new moon every month, when all the worlds are elevated up a rung. And even ordinary souls are able to ascend through the channel which passes from the lower Garden of Eden to the higher Garden of Eden. The higher Garden of Eden being the world of Bria. And when these souls pass to the higher Garden of Eden, they are able to take pleasure in God and enjoy a ray of the divine presence. Some of you may be familiar, but it's known that on Shabbat, the souls of our departed are also going up a level. And that's why there's a joy for us down here. There's a joy for the souls on high. And many practices of mourning, let's say a Shiva, during the week of mourning after the loss of a loved one, we sit Shiva. But on Shabbat, we don't sit Shiva, because on Shabbat, the soul of your loved one is on a higher level. So it doesn't need the mourning process that you are honoring it with, because it's already on a higher level. And so too, the whole first year, we say Kaddish and we do extra prayers. But on Shabbat, those extra prayers are not needed, because on Shabbat, the soul of your loved one is already on a higher level as it is on Shabbat. So that's what we're learning now, that on Shabbat, our souls are on a higher rung than before. So if we were in the lower Garden of Eden, is where the source of our souls are from, the world of Yetzirah, on Shabbat, it's actually rising up to the world of Bria to a higher level. Let's continue inside. The reason why the upper Garden of Eden, the highest pleasure of heaven, is to be found in the world of intellect, the world of Bria, is because there is no real enjoyment or pleasure for a created intellect other than grasping with the intellect, understanding with logic, and recognizing with the mind. Whatever could be understood or grasped of the blessed infinite light, which of course can't be known directly, but only through God's Chachma and Bina, which shine there in the world of Bria. So let's just explain this. The true pleasure for the soul is in the world of Bria, the world of creation. Why? Because that is the world of intellect. If you have a genius of a person, he's not going to get excited by a tasty chocolate souffle. It doesn't speak to him. What speaks to him is words of intelligence, a challenging problem that he could solve, or a beautiful description of something that really resonates with him. So that's a true pleasure for a person of intellect. So our souls of intelligence, where do they derive their true pleasure, is in this world of intellect, which on Shabbat, our souls rise up to this world. And for those of tzaddikim, they're there constantly. But the point of this section is speaking to us, that we rise to there on special occasions. So now we're on the bottom line of the page, if you're looking in the Kindle. But if all the worlds are elevated on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh and New Moon, why don't the angels also rise to the world of Bria on these days? So why is it only the souls that rise, and why not the angels? And the reason why these souls are permitted to rise to the world of Bria, above the angels which remain in Yetzirah, the lower world, even though seemingly these souls are no better than the angels, as their worship is based only on an innate reverence and love, and not something generated using their minds. But the reason why these souls are allowed to rise to Bria is because they have an advantage over the angels. What is the advantage? In that their reverence and love causes the Sitra Achra within their bodies to be subdued. Unlike the angels, which do not have a coarse physical body. So this is a concept that I explained many months ago in chapter 26. So I just want to reiterate it, as one of the most powerful words of the Tanya and Kabbalah is the word in Hebrew, in Aramaic actually, called iskafia. Iskafia means to subdue, to hold back, to push away, to bend ourselves, even though it's going against our nature or going against our desires. It's called iskafia. That's one of the main purposes of why we're here, to hold back or to do something that we are not interested in doing when we're feeling lazy. That's actually the deepest part of how we could, or I don't know, deepest, but definitely a deep part of when we could show love to someone we love, is that when we're not interested in doing something, but we do it anyway because it's for the other person. That's iskafia. So what it's saying here is, the world, the world of Bria, which is the world of intelligence, is higher than the world of Yetzirah. I'm going to give a basic summary here. And the angels are in the world of Yetzirah. The reason is because their mode of service is very natural. Their method of service is innate. It's a relationship. They do things with instinct. That's what an animal does. It's instinctive. And the angels' service of God is also instinctive. It's natural to them to love God. So they worship God with their natural love and reverence. But tzaddikim, they go above and beyond. And that's why they reach the world of Bria. But me and you, the average soul, also serves God with that innate and natural, instinctive relationship with God. So why do we on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh get to rise up to the higher world when we're still just serving God with our instinct, which is similar to that of the angels? So why don't the angels get to rise up when we get to rise up on the special occasions? And he's answering is because we have a one-up, we have an advantage, we have something superior over the angels, and that is that we fight, we are at war with this klipa, with this negative energy, and that when we hold back, we accomplish iskafia that the angels don't get to accomplish, which means we have a coarse body that we are, I wouldn't say fighting with, but we are dealing with, we are focusing on. We have to learn how to overcome the desires and subdue them. So because of that, we are given the gift that on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, we get to rise up because of, as almost like a reward for working with our body and accomplishing this iskafia, which the angels who don't have a body, the angels who don't have any klipa, any negative energy surrounding them, they don't have to fight with it. So they don't accomplish iskafia. So then, therefore, they don't get to rise up on these special occasions like today. Let's see that inside. And that's a very powerful point of why we're given the opportunity on Shabbat to rise up. So let's see in the middle of the Kindle, the Sitra Achra is subdued both when they turn away from evil, which is a quote from Psalms, which is overcoming and breaking free from their desires, as well as when they do good, as mentioned above. So again, our job is to break away, to turn away from anything evil, and to do good and work on the positive things. Sometimes we have to push ourselves to do this. So because we have to push ourselves, which is the iskafia, we subdue the Siddur Achra, it bends the Siddur Achra, and by doing that, we get to rise up on these special occasions. So why should this quality of suppressing Siddur Achra give souls the merit of entering the world of Bria, a world of intellect, where they do not really belong? So meaning, why is it that our iskafia allows us to rise up? Like, what's that? Why is that the reward? For these souls possess free choice to choose evil, God forbid, and instead they chose good. To subdue the Siddur Achra, to exalt the glory of the Blessed Holy One, etc. Like the advantage of light that comes from darkness, as mentioned above. In choosing good over evil, these souls exercise their free choice. In that sense, they do share at least some resemblance to the souls of tzaddikim, since tzaddikim develop an intellectual appreciation of God through exercising their free choice. Choosing good over evil isn't enough for a soul to earn a permanent place in the world of Bria, but it is enough to help the soul enter there on Shabbat and new moon, when the worlds are naturally shifting in that direction. So just to explain this part, just to bring you this the basis of the foundation of where we're holding, and just some of it may be reiterating, but I don't think it's a bad thing to review a little bit. What we know is that we have a world called Bria, the world of creation. It's a higher world. We have a world called Yetzirah. It's a world called formation. The angels' souls, the energy, the beings of the angels, they remain stagnant in the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. But the souls of the righteous, they are located in the world of Bria, which is the world of intellect. Why are they given that higher level of world? Is because they serve God with their intellect. They have their free choice and they rise up, and therefore they serve God with their intellect. That's where they are. Whereas the angels, they serve God with their instinctive nature, which is on a lower level. But me and you, we also serve God with more of our instinctive behavior. And therefore we also, like the angels, are on the lower world. But on Shabbat, we rise up and we reach the world of intellect, the world of creation. Why? Because, and this is the last paragraph we were just saying, because since we serve God with the iskafia, which means we are given the free choice to choose between good and evil, and we choose the good over the evil, and we push away the evil. So in a similar way, that's what the angels, that's what the souls of tzaddikim are doing also. They have the free choice and they're serving God, and they get elevated to the level of Bria. So therefore, we also, similar to that, having the free choice and working with God, serving God with iskafia, we also get to rise up, at least on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, to this higher level of Bria, whereas the souls of angels remain on the lower world. So some of it may be a little bit esoteric, Kabbalistic. In one line, what we need to know is that my soul, your soul on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, we get elevated to a higher world called Bria, whereas the angels remain on the lower world. And the difference why is because since we serve God with our free choice, the freedom to choose between good and evil, and we serve God with the good, which is iskafia, because of that, we get to rise up when the worlds shift upwards and ascend higher. Okay, section 3. And where is it? Right in the middle of the Kindle, and also on the bottom of 456. How your mitzvahs ascend the heavens. So this is now going to go through a little bit of spiritual geography, the place where our mitzvahs reach. Our discussion so far has focused on the different spiritual heights achieved by the soul through its worship. But we haven't discussed what happens to the worship itself. So far it's been discussing what happens to the soul through the worship. But what about the worship itself? Where in the spiritual stratosphere do our mitzvahs end up? Which I love this idea. When I do a mitzvah, right now we're studying Torah, we're doing a mitzvah. Where does that mitzvah go to? Where does it rise up to? So till now we were focusing what happens to the soul. And we were saying that the soul rises up to the world of Bria, the previous section, and on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh. But what happens to the mitzvah itself? Now, the above discussion concerned the spiritual address of the souls, as well as the location where the souls were temporarily stationed on the Shabbat and new moon. But we didn't discuss what happens to the Torah and worship of those souls. So now we're going to study what happens to our study. What happens when we study Torah? What is the spiritual address of where that ends up? The Kabbalah teaches that each spiritual world contains both A, an infrastructure, and B, godly light that fills that infrastructure. So again, you have the infrastructure, a world, the way it's built, a spiritual world, and then you have the light that comes into the world and shines. The technical names for these are the infrastructure of chambers. In Hebrew, it's called heichal or heichalot. Heichal is one chamber. Heichalot are chambers in the plural. And B, lights of sephiras. Your soul, the Tanya will now explain, can only reach the chamber of any given world. But your mitzvah, which is actually God's will, merges with the sephiras in that world. So I love this idea. Let's just clarify this. Till now, we were saying that our soul elevates through our iskafia and through Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh to a higher world. But in that world, there's the infrastructure of the world, but then there's also the light of the world. Our soul could reach the address of that world, the infrastructure of that world, but our mitzvah can tap into the light of that world. Our mitzvah reaches to the light of that world, the sphera, which actually the English word of sapphire comes from the Hebrew word of sephira, which is that shining light in a world, which is pretty cool. And from Lynn, we see where it's from chapter 6 of Isaiah, we say kadosh, right? The Seraphim say kadosh, kadosh, and we recite these to rise the level. We recite this, we rise to the level of the angels. So are we actually elevated above the angels? So that's a very good question. So I'm actually studying another text. The answer simply is yes. The souls of Israel first of all, our source is higher than the angels, but we descend lower than the angels. That's why the way it seems like to us is angels are on our higher level, because we have a body, they don't. We're more physical, but we have the opportunity through a mitzvah to reach higher than where any angel could reach. And, I'll just go a little bit off topic for a moment. It's interesting. Our tradition it says in Jewish law that when I enter a cemetery, we actually don't want to show the cemetery, the people lying in the cemetery are tzitzit. Tzitzit are the fringes that hang on our sides, and we basically don't want to do or to show mitzvahs to those that can't fulfill mitzvahs. They don't have the souls of the departed can't fulfill a mitzvah, so let's say when I have my tefillin, I actually don't put on tefillin in a cemetery because I'm doing a mitzvah in front of them. The wording of the law is don't be loeg larash. Don't laugh. Don't tease the ones that can't fulfill something. Because it's only during our lifetime that we're in this physical world that we're able to do a mitzvah. So while in this world we're actually lower than any other world, where the souls they rise higher, right? It's called the higher life because they ascend to a higher level. So even though we're on a lower world, but it's only here that we can accomplish what can't be accomplished anywhere else. So through our mitzvahs, we can actually reach a higher address. So angels also, they're on a high place, but since we have the opportunity of doing a mitzvah, we can reach to a higher source than where the angels are. So the angels don't really rise up. They remain at that world. We, even though we, in this lower world, we rise up to a higher world. And I think there was one more. From Mrs. Berger, Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. So today is one of the days. Very good. Exactly. I mentioned that at the beginning. Very cool. Yep, exactly. Rosh Chodesh today. So it's a great day to have this lesson. Okay, so just to summarize, there's a practical lesson on the side. So before I reshare, I'm just going to read it. If you're looking in the book, it's on 457. I'm just going to read this practical lesson. And it says like this. It's really important that you try to develop feelings for God through contemplative work in your mind. That's because when you worship God based on ideas that you have acquired externally with your mind, you begin to transcend yourself. That's an amazing accomplishment. How could you transcend yourself? By meditating on ideas and intelligence that you acquire through the study. You reach a place that's even higher. Let's see that inside. I may have jumped the gun on that practical lesson, but what we know so far is that we have the infrastructure or the chamber of a world that our souls can reach. But when we meditate on a mitzvah, when we have the kavanah, the intention, then our soul is able to reach not only to the chamber or the infrastructure of a world, but also to the sephiras or the divine light within that world. Let's continue to see that inside as the Alter Rebbe elaborates this idea. We're going to start again from the top of the page on the Kindle and also the top of the page on 457. Your soul, the Tanya will now explain, can only reach the chamber of any given world, but your mitzvah, which is actually God's will, merges with the spheres in that world. Your Torah and worship rise higher than any chamber and are literally absorbed in the 10 spheres of the appropriate world, which are actual godliness, since the blessed infinite light is merged with the spheres as perfectly as could be. The difference between chambers and spheres is that God's infinite light is totally merged with the spheres, whereas the chambers retain a separate identity. Your mitzvah, which is God's undiluted will, merges perfectly with the spheres, but your soul, which is a separate entity from God, must remain in the chambers. Maybe I'll read a little more and then explain it. To be precise, the world which your worship reaches depends on whether it was inspired by contemplative work or innate soul feelings. Through worship motivated by intellectually generated reverence and love, the worship rises to the 10 spheres of Bria. Whereas through worship motivated by natural reverence and love, the worship rises to the 10 spheres of Yetzirah. So the main thing over here is our contemplation. When we have kavanah, which is the focus, the attentiveness, and the meditation behind the mitzvah, our mitzvah is able to reach a higher source, a higher address, a higher spiritual world. It's able to reach the spheres within Bria. Whereas if I do it just based on my innate instinctive love of God or my natural reverence and respect for God, which means when I do a mitzvah out of routine, saying, "Oh, this is what I got to do," which is great, but it's reaching the spheres within a lower world called Yetzirah. Whereas if I meditate and I do a mitzvah with my contemplation and I do it based on my intelligence and my want in it, then it's able to reach a world of Bria. The difference is the soul on its own is only able to reach a chamber of a world. But God's spheres, which is the light of God, is merging directly with God. So when I do a mitzvah with my will and attentiveness, it's merging directly with God's will, which is the light of a world. So I don't know if I'm explaining it all that well. I'm going to let the Alter Rebbe read a little more inside, and then we could try to elaborate. It's definitely a deep Kabbalistic chapter. Going into the nuances of a world, right? Where the angels come from, where tzaddikim souls are, where we rise up on Shabbat. And now even further, what we're saying is through our meditation, our mitzvah is able to reach not just a world, the infrastructure, the chamber, but also tap into the spheres of a world. And specifically over here, through contemplation, the world of Bria, which is the highest of worlds. Let's see that over here. I'm just going to also drink some water. You can make a blessing if you have something in front of you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyah bidvaro. The bottom of the page, and this is, I'm hoping, the hardest section of the chapter. But again, it's a pretty long chapter. I think I warned you of that at the beginning. There's a lot going on in chapter 39, but the theme is kavanah, that through our kavanah, through our intention, we're able to reach the higher sephira in the world of Bria, meaning God's light the way it is in the world of Bria. When you conjure the innate feelings, right, the innate feelings are like those of angels. It's the instinctive of your soul for God. It seems like you've transcended yourself, because you're focusing on God and not on your own concerns. The problem is, since these feelings are innate, they're really coming from your self-concept and not despite it. You're feeling that it's all about God and not about you, but that's because it's natural for someone with your kind of soul to feel that way. Worship from that level of consciousness reaches the world of Yetzirah. On one hand, it's worship. You're thinking about God, so it's far beyond this physical world of Asiyah, which is the world we're in now, where concern is focused on the self. But since your vision of beyond the self is actually coming from yourself, it's only one world up from the overtly self-centered consciousness of Asiyah. But when your worship is rooted in an intellectual appreciation of God, it rises to a higher world. The intellect is capable of objectivity. It allows you to explore ideas and phenomena outside yourself. So when your mind contemplates God, leading you to worship, it's the God concept you've grasped outside yourself that has compelled you. Your worship wasn't motivated by your natural disposition or self-concept. It's a new, externally acquired idea that has moved you. So unlike the worlds of Asiya and Bria, which both share an energy of self, in Bria there is a paradigm shift as we begin to transcend the self. Above, so let's just explain this as an awesome idea. I'm just going to linger on this page a little bit because it's a long read. So in case you want to absorb that idea. It's such a beautiful idea, because so many times when we worship with God, when we do something for God, if you go to the core of it, it's still somewhat self-centered, even though you're putting yourself on the side and you're doing it for God, but it's really coming from you wanting to do it. I wouldn't say it's ego-driven, because that's a separate concept, but it's coming from your innate feelings of what you want to do. You feel good doing this. So it's still somewhat, even though it's still somewhat subjective, I guess I would use that word. It's still coming from your appreciation and your feelings of how you develop yourself with God. A higher level is when you totally take an objective view. The wording over here, he says, it's a paradigm shift, that you rise yourself up not to serve God based on my feelings, which is more innate, but rather something more of an intellectual base, which is more external, which is not from my innate feelings. It's more from an acquired self, and from there you're able to transcend to a higher level. So it's a pretty deep idea. I would love to come up with an analogy for it. It's just not coming now. But the point is that when you have an intellectual appreciation of this kavanah, you rise up to a higher world than where you could reach through your innate feelings. You have a feeling of God, of love, or of reverence. That's somewhat like the angels, and therefore you are in the world of Yetzirah, which is based on my instinctive, subjective way of serving God. But when you have an intellectual base, when your foundation of your motivation for the mitzvah is based on my intellect, on a meditation, then you're actually going above where your innate feelings can take you. And it's not from your natural disposition. And then you reach to a higher level than where you could reach on your own. So I find this a hard idea to fully explain. Let me just take a question. If someone has a way of explaining it, I would love to hear. How do we know if a mitzvah is self-centered? That's a good one. So let me just read Lynn's question. It's a very good question. How do we know if a mitzvah is self-centered appreciation or if it's objective and external, if it's God-driven? Very nice. I don't know. It's a very lofty idea. I think this is an incredible place to reach, to transcend yourself.
I think you did a great job of explaining it.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm glad that was recorded. So for posterity, we have that. The way what comes to mind is always in a relationship between us and God. I always go back to the relationship between husband and wife. So many times we have our way of what we expect the other person wants, how we want to respect that person, but it's our way of respecting them. It's based on how let's say if our spouse is going through a tough time, so we have our way of getting them through it based on our feelings of them, based on our feelings of the idea. It's more instinctive based on that. But then you have to really be there for the other person. I'm not saying that way is bad. You're fully supportive and you're in tune with them. But then you have a way that you're being there for them and supporting your spouse, not based on my instinctive feeling, but based on taking an objective way of what that person needs right now, not what I need to tell that person. It's based on what does that person need now. It's a different, both are important parts of the relationship. One is instinctive, what I know I could do right now for them, and then taking a moment and saying, no, it's not about what I know I could tell them now. Because that's more coming from a subjective place. It's more coming from not self-centered, but it's more coming of what I know myself to be, putting yourself out of that and putting yourself into that person. What does that person need to hear right now? Even if it's going against my nature to say, but what could I help that person with? It's taking an objective role and transcending yourself almost. So that's an external, let's see, from Naomi, she says, it might help to give an example about what it looks like when we do a mitzvah with an intellectual and contemplative attitude. Right, which is really the point, right over here, when we do a mitzvah with our instinct, let me explain it this way. Like the Rebbe, I've probably given this example before, but and for so many times it takes a Rebbe to be able to do something like this. But the Rebbe many times, let's say with charity, the Rebbe wanted us to leave the box that we put ourselves in. So according to Jewish law, we are to give 10% to charity. It's called Meiser. So if you make $1,000, you give $100. If you made $1 million, you give 100,000 to charity. It's 10%. But there were times that the Rebbe wanted a certain person to go above and beyond. I'm not even saying when it comes to 10% or not, but there was a certain Farbrengen that was very famous. It was in 1958. It was December 1958. And most of the people at the Farbrengen in Brooklyn, New York, were themselves victims of the Holocaust, or at least coming from as immigrants from Europe that were totally broken, poor, had members that were lost in the Holocaust. And the Rebbe, at a certain point of this Farbrengen, it was late into the night, it was actually early in the morning, there was a chassid that later said in his diary that this Farbrengen changed Lubavitch, changed Chabad. And what he referred to was at a certain point of this Farbrengen, the Rebbe wanted people to give charity to a certain fund. The Rebbe had a new community that was getting started in Jerusalem, and the Rebbe wanted to help them get the funds established to start this community. And the Rebbe wanted people to give above and beyond their norms. So people pledged, but the Rebbe said, I'm going to actually look at what they're pledging and tell them how much more they should pledge, which is a very intimidating thing. So the Rebbe didn't say how much they pledged. The Rebbe just said how much more they should pledge. So if, let's say the Rebbe, if someone said, I'm pledging $5 in the 50s, the Rebbe says you should do 5 times that much, or 10 times that much, or 1,000 times that much. And there were people that didn't have those funds, but the Rebbe still said to do it. The Rebbe, and people later said that Farbrengen broke the box that people put themselves in, broke the box of that community, where we thought this is what we could do. And because we were basing it on our subjective, expected, what we know ourselves to be able to do. But the Rebbe wanted to remove that ceiling that we put above ourselves and reach to a higher place. So really, that's a Rebbe concept. But over here, we're not saying a Rebbe telling you what to do. Over here, we're saying where our intellect could take us above the instinctive expectancy of what we know ourselves to be. It's easier to talk about it. It's harder to implement it, to be able to reach a higher place and transcend oneself. Based on what I expect myself, that's what I'm used to, that's what I know, that's what I instinctively can feel and can serve, but then reach to a higher place. When you do a mitzvah, not only do it with that natural instinct of feeling of love, but do it with a intellectual base that could even rise you to a higher place. The source, the address that you're able to reach is the sphere, the godly light and energy that is within the higher world of Bria. I'm still going to just go on because it's a long section, and we'll see if the Alter Rebbe is able to continue. But let's see. We're on the bottom paragraph of the Kindle page, and we're towards the top of 458 if you're looking in the book. Above, the Tanya stated that your worship rises to the spheres of either Yetzirah or Bria, in contrast to the soul, which rises to the chambers, but not the spheres. So again, when we serve, when we do a mitzvah, we're going to the sphere, which is the godly light, which is the will of God that we're able to reach. So now we continue along that theme. And within the 10 spheres of Yetzirah are enmeshed the 10 spheres of Bria. And within the 10 spheres of Bria are enmeshed the 10 spheres of Atzilus. You guys are going to love this idea. And the 10 spheres of Bria are merged there in Atzilus perfectly. And the 10 spheres of Atzilus are perfectly merged with their emanating source, the blessed infinite light. I just want to explain this idea. It's a very important idea, especially in the world we live in now. It's a Kabbalistic word, and it's called Hitgalalut. Hitgalalut means inclusion. It's not diversity, it's actually inclusion. Diversity is a very popular word nowadays, which means I can tolerate other people's views. It's diverse. I say this, you say that, we can get along. To have a workplace where there's a diverse of ethnicity and race and people from different countries, it adds so much to the work environment and to the experiences that people have. That's diversity. Hitgalalut is when I am a person fully of love. You are a person fully of discipline. And we don't only are able to get along, we actually fully complement each other. And I need you and you need me. Which means I can take you to a place that you on your own can get to. And you can take me to a place that on my own I can get to. It's like the full dose of inclusion, where we complement each other so much that we're a force that can't be reckoned with, because only when we work together are we able to rise above. So what he's saying here is that the godly lights are all enmeshed in each other. They're all, it's not diverse, it's actually all included. Light is something that it gets not entangled and lost. It all is connected to each other. One light is connected to the next light, and higher and higher and higher up the ladder. So the light in the lower world of Yetzirah is totally connected with the light in the higher world. And the light in the higher world is totally connected with God himself, which is where the source is from. So when I am able to connect, whether through my instinctive mitzvah or through my contemplation in a mitzvah, even though it reaches a certain address, but ultimately that light in that address is connected to a higher light above that address. So ultimately, by me doing that mitzvah with the kavanah, with the proper intention and attentiveness, it's actually able to also reach God himself, because the light is all connected. It's all included within each other. I think that's the point that we're trying to explain. And Sherry, you're absolutely right. The key seems to be kavanah. It's going to, this entire chapter is trying to go along that theme, to hone in that point, that kavanah is actually able to take you to the highest spiritual address. But it's kavanah that not is, and there's 2 points of kavanah. There is the instinctive part of doing the mitzvah with the instinctive love, which is also kavanah. You have this feeling and this emotion of reverence and awe in doing the mitzvah. But then you have another one that can take you even farther. That's like where the angels could take you, or where the angels get to. But then you have another part, which is the kavanah that comes as a result of a divine contemplation. And that's able to even transcend your own instinct, your own self. I think this is probably the deepest we've gone in Tanya. It's cool because in general, I've always addressed Tanya as the practical program guide for life. But over here, he's getting obviously very esoteric and talking about these subliminal levels of kavanah, where it reaches. But it's obviously, the point is to tell us that through my kavanah and through your kavanah, it's able to reach these high places. So I guess it's to try to give us an appreciation of just how high it reaches. Let's see that. Where I think towards the top, a third of the way down. Let's see that again. Once an entity merges with the sphere as in any world, it has a straight path to the blessed infinite one, because A, the spheres in every world are deeply enmeshed with each other, and B, the highest of the worlds, which is Atzilus, the world of emanation, is totally merged with the blessed infinite one. The divine lights, which are spheres, are capable of total enmeshment with each other, because they don't have a sense of separateness that would block such a merging. But while the worship rises to God, that's not so with the souls, which are not absorbed into the 10 divine sephiras, but rather they remain in the chambers and repositories of either Bria and Yetzirah. Being stuck in the chambers doesn't mean that the souls can't enjoy any divine radiance. They are just limited to the diminished radiance shining in that world. And rather than actually merging with God, they merely enjoy the radiance of the divine presence from a distance. The radiance of the divine presence referring to the blessed infinite light as it is merged with the 10 spheres of Bria or Yetzirah, shining through their filter in a diminished fashion. Unlike the spheres, whose energy, and I'm going to summarize this in a moment, whose energy flows directly from the blessed infinite one, the soul can only perceive a diminished godliness that shines to its vantage point, either the world of Bria or Yetzirah or Bria. And this radiance is in fact nothing other than the radiance of that person's actual Torah and worship. The divine light of the mitzvah as it shines in the world, either Yetzirah or Bria. This is from the Zohar and Vayakel, since, as we learned in chapter 37, the reward for a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. So over here is just going to quote the Zohar, and we'll stop with this. The Zohar speaks of garments made from the good deeds which a person did following the commandments of the Torah. Through them, which means through these garments, which we achieve through mitzvahs, the soul stands in the lower Garden of Eden, clothed in these precious garments. And if that soul ascends through the opening into the higher heaven, which is the upper Garden of Eden, other precious and lofty garments are presented before her, made from the desire and attentiveness of the heart during Torah study and prayer. So there's deep stuff, ladies and gentlemen, going on over here. I'm just going to give you a quick summary. The main point of the way I could understand it is, as Sherry was saying, is kavanah. There's two types of kavanah. There's an animalistic kavanah, which sounds a very derogatory, but what that means is it's more instinctive. It's a kavanah that comes from my natural disposition of love, my subjective understanding of God and of the mitzvah. That's going to take us to the same place that the angels are, because the angels also, they are instinctive in their behavior and worship of God. And that's in the world known as Yetzirah, which is the world of that instinctive love and reverence of God. But the tzaddikim are reaching to the world of Bria, the world of creation, which is really the world of intellect, because they serve God with a higher method of meditation, a higher kavanah, which is that of intellect, contemplation. But what he's going on now further to say is that through this contemplation, you're able to reach and rise even above your self-centeredness or your self-perceived understanding. You're able to go even above it. And the way he brings home that point, he explains like this, that the spiritual address of our soul, where our soul reaches, is the world itself, the chamber. But through the performance of a mitzvah, it's actually reaching the light in that world. Once you reach the light in that world, it's able to rise up because the light is all enmeshed. The light is all connected. Whereas when the soul is the one driving it, which means it's a soul-driven mitzvah, because it's more instinctive, which is where the soul is doing the mitzvah based on the soul's love, then it's only able to reach the world itself, which is itself a great thing. But when you have your kavanah involved in the mitzvah, the divine light is able to reach to the highest of places because all of the lights of the world are all connected. So ultimately, the light of Yetzirah is connected to the world of the light of Bria, and the light of Bria is connected to the light in the world of Atzilus, all the way to God's infinite being. So ultimately, the point is like this: when you do a mitzvah with a proper kavanah, transcending yourself, that address of the worship reaches to the light in the highest of worlds, ultimately to God itself. It's a quite deep stuff. Thank you for putting on your seatbelts and buckling up for it. There's still some deep stuff to come. I really want to get through this chapter. In the next chapter, which is 40, it actually says how our kavanah will actually also be able to create angels. Our mitzvah with kavanah not only rises above angels, it actually creates angels themselves. So that's going to be another interesting theme, all related to this theme of kavanah, which is that attentiveness. And from Marsha, does bittul apply to explain contemplation in a way that doesn't come from ego? Exactly. So bittul, which is that total, the simple word for bittul is humility, but over here it's even more like self-abnegation, like totally canceling out yourself where you are not in existence. I just want to clarify this with just as we conclude the class, I have another minute or two. The idea of light, if you think of it, right now, many of you have a window open and I could see the light shining through. If you would close the curtain, that sunlight is not able to get through anymore. The reason is because light on its own doesn't have a definition. Light on its own doesn't have its own existence. The whole existence of light is only that it's connected to the source of the light. On its own, light is nothing. You can't you can't touch the light. All it is only revealing the source. But as soon as you cut off the source, the light disappears. As soon as you close the curtain, the light is not there because light itself doesn't have an existence. That's the ultimate word of bittul that was just posted in the comment in the chat. Bittul means it's not an existence. That's what light is. Light is not an existence on its own. So when you do a mitzvah with the proper kavanah, you're tapping into the light of that world. But once you tap into the light of the world, light is always going to be connected to the higher source of the light. So ultimately to the highest, which is God himself, the infinite light of God, is all going to be connected through your mitzvah done with the proper kavanah, because then you tap into the light. Once you tap into the light, you're reaching a place above yourself and your existence. That's what bittul is. And ultimately you reach to the place of the true existence of God, which is where the source of the light is. It is this where a unique creativity comes from that seems out of our own intelligence. Absolutely. That's actually what chachma is. Over here, throughout the Tanya, when we talk about chachma, bina, and das, which is really what the word Chabad is an acronym of, chachma, bina, and das. Chachma means inquiry, like that curiosity to think outside of yourself. Chachma, which is literally translated as wisdom, is that bittul, to think of what's higher, that inquiry outside of yourself, rising above what you expect. That's like out of our own intelligence. That's ultimately what creativity and chachma is about. Tzaddikim worship with das, I guess so. Yeah. All right, we'll stop the class here. I hope it didn't totally overwhelm all of you. It's definitely Kabbalistic ideas, but God willing, we'll get through it together. And starting in the next few chapters, it's going to get through practical meditation. So God willing, we'll get there soon. Yes, Robin.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say thank you so much. This is very energizing to me. It's making me very excited. I want to learn more and more.
Awesome. Okay, it's definitely deep stuff. Thank you so much for that. All right, everyone, have a great day and a good Rosh Chodesh.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You too. Have a great
Thank you.
day.
Great day.
Terry. Bye, Nancy. Bye, Shira. Everyone feel good. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Marcia.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Lynn.